How's it going, guys? Anfield here. Welcome to a new video. Today's video we're going to be picking up where we left off in the previous video and once again having a look at the tier 10 Swedish heavy tank coming out in patch 9.17. Now I asked you guys how to pronounce the tank and I got some conflicting reports, so I'm still not entirely sure, so just to be safe we're just going to call it the Cranberry. Please don't hate me, so that I don't mess up the pronunciation. So we're going to look at this tank once again, but in the previous video we looked at the stats, compared the two tanks between the 50B and this tank just to see what the statistics say using Wargame's comparison feature, and also showed you a little bit of gameplay out of a replay that I did on the actual test server. But for this video, we're going to actually look at the tanks in a training room and compare the 50B with the Cranberry and see which is better at what, and also do a more detailed armor test of the Cranberry itself to see just how good that armor actually is. So let's get into the video. So those of you that will remember the previous video, in the stats it looked like the 50B should definitely always be faster, but it turned out to actually not be the case whatsoever, and I thought this little footage I got here was going to be useless because the tanks deviated towards each other and was obviously scraping against each other, so I was actually going to scrap this until this happened, when we actually got to the hill and the Cranberry sort of turned on these like booster rockets that it somehow had and decided to go to Mars and yeah, outstrip the 50B despite them rubbing against each other. So the next test I put them actually climbing the steeper part of the hill just to see. Now it's not entirely perfect and I'm also trying to control both tanks at the same time, but I've got them pretty synced quite well. I orangutanged both keyboards and pressed W at the same time. But you can see just how much faster this thing is going uphill, which is kind of frustrating because that's a really key feature on a lot of things. Your ability to get up the hill faster will mean you'll be safer from enemy fire, you'll get to more positions faster, and that's really important. So it's quite frustrating for me as a 50B lover to see just how much faster the Cranberry is at climbing this hill than the 50B. So quite a lot of power creeping going on here. But regardless, yeah, it kind of sucked to see this kind of thing happening. So the 50B isn't entirely slower than the Cranberry. You know, it's faster going downhill, as you're about to see. That's purely because of the higher top speed, I guess. But going downhill, the ability to go downhill slightly faster is not entirely as useful. I mean, maybe if you're running away and retreating, that's kind of nice, but otherwise it's not that awesome, I guess. So yeah, this win by the 50B doesn't mean as much, so that's kind of frustrating. However, there is one strength the 50B does definitely have, and you can see it here, and that's turning around. So if you need to turn the tank around and maneuver the tank at high speeds, the 50B will do it much better than the Cranberry. You can see here the Cranberry much slower. And I should also state that both tanks here have rations and vents, but they don't have any crew skills. They're 100% crews, but they don't have Brothers in Arms or any other crew skills. I know a lot of you were frustrated that I did that in the comparison, but I just wanted to get a general overview. And the better crew on the 50B, you know, obviously would give it an advantage, but not by a great deal. You still get the general idea. The most important thing in that test was to see the actual armor, and the depression is what I really wanted to point out. But yeah, you can see easily just how much faster the 50B is here. So one small thing the 50B does have over this tank. So the last test, because I didn't really think I needed to test armor, we're going to look at accuracy between the two tanks. So the idea here is to hit the actual back turret of the Cranberry here with both 50B and the Cranberry itself. And you can see the shell deviation of the 50B wasn't entirely great there. It did deviate the shells a little bit. And this, of course, could be RNG. This isn't entirely scientific, and I would need to do it over and over and over again, but test servers are a pain to actually set this up. It takes quite a lot of time. It would be helpful to have someone else, but that's okay. You at least get the general idea of the accuracy of the two tanks, and at best you could say there's almost no difference between the two. At absolute worst for the 50B, you could say the Cranberry is better. So yeah, not great news, because you see here, it hits the back of the turret every single time, and again, that could be RNG. More tests would be required, and you know, you could maybe change it up with different kind of tanks with smaller weak points and things like that to aim at, but because I was doing it by myself, it would have taken a very long time to do the test over and over and over again. So to test the actual turret armor on the Cranberry, we're going to use the 50B's APCR rounds, which are very high pen rounds. I put the Cranberry here in a position where it can actually fire, so yes, the 50B is vulnerable here where I'm actually shooting back with the Cranberry. That's pretty scary. That's 12 degrees of gun depression, and that is also a even more sloped turret than normal. But even on level ground, it doesn't seem to make a difference with the 50B's APCR rounds. Just cannot be penetrated. Yeah, it's pretty brutal. You can see just how strong it is there. So you can see at this angle where you flatten the turret angle a little bit, because it's kind of like a pike, similar to the front armor plate there. It is actually penable by APCR, but with AP rounds, better luck. Next time you cannot pen it. I mean, at this point you would be penning the side of the turret, which I'll show you in a second, but just to show just how good that turret is, despite the slope not being angled correctly towards me. So here you can just see real quick that at least it is penable on the side of the turret. Hooray! So yeah. Keeping up with the turret theme, we're going to have a look at the hatches on the tank so you can see at what angles they are penable. Now, you can see here that the gun is slightly pointed down, which means the turret is slightly pointed down, making the hatches a little bit more vulnerable than they would be if the gun was aimed up at me like it normally would be. So the fact that I'm still bouncing some of these shots is actually kind of scary. Yeah, rip. So you can see, okay, yeah, the gun's pointed down a little bit, so the hatches are vulnerable. But this is with the gun basically pointed directly at me at a normal sort of angle. And you can see just how successful I am being at penning these hatches. It's kind of scary. Now you can see the difference here if I point the gun down once again, which isn't going to be common. Oh, that happened twice, by the way. I ammo racked the tank twice doing that, although it was the other hatch the previous time. So I guess the ammo rack is in the turret. But you won't have an opportunity to do that too often to one of these tanks because they just won't be looking down like this and you won't be above them. If they're looking down like this, it's probably because you're on a hill and you won't be able to see them. And that's just a overmatch at the top there. So, of course, we're raving about the turret, but the frontal armor is pretty standard as if you were playing a Russian tank such as the IS-7, IS-3, T-10, etc. Those general rules apply with the pike nose, lower front plate vulnerable, but upper front plate not vulnerable until you sort of defeat the angle. But you can see here, these are APCR shots onto that turret, and I have to actually get closer to penetrate it, so crazy, crazy turret at the end of the day, and that's what matters. So finally, I decided to bring the big guns out and brought the JP100 to test the turret armor. Now, of course, this is on flat ground, and if the tank was being played on a hill, the slope would be even steeper. But you can see that the JP100 AP round is not enough to get through this turret, which is absolutely crazy. Fortunately, you'll see that the heat round is actually enough to get through, so at least that's something. But yeah, AP on the JP100, that's really high AP standard pen, and yep, not enough to get through it even on a standard angle here. But yeah, so this tank is pretty broken. I don't think there's any way to get around it. There's no way to say, well, it's weak at this, because well, it isn't. It's not weak at anything that I can see. It's fast. The turret is incredible. 12 degrees of gun depression. Its autoloader reloads overall faster than the 50B, even with the 2.75 seconds. But it doesn't matter if you have a longer interclip reload because the exposure doesn't matter. Typically, it's bad for an autoloader to be exposed. Because obviously, you know, the longer you're out there, you know, the more damage you take from enemy tanks. You generally don't have the armor to deflect it. This tank does, so it has an extra 2.2 or 2.5 seconds overall, or 0.25, sorry, I'll get there in the end. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's absolutely insane how good this tank is. So yeah, that concludes my video for the Cranberry. This is obviously the first iteration of the test server, so one can hope that there is hope that the tank will be nerfed, because I think it has to be nerfed. I don't see a way around it. You know, the E5 was one thing. The E5 was at least vulnerable in certain situations. It didn't have 12 degrees of gun depression. You know, the hatch was still vulnerable to high pen rounds. This tank is just not vulnerable, and that's a really big problem. So yeah, I do hope that something has changed, but you know, don't go crazy. You know, let's be constructive and let Wargaming know that the tank needs to be changed. And hopefully, since this is the first iteration of the test server, there will be changes done to the tank. And now, there's lots of content I still do have to make on the 9.17 test server, including the overmatch changes and the tank destroyer. So you can expect those videos. I will potentially be moving, so that's gonna, you know, kind of be a little bit of a hindrance, so that it might be difficult for me to make videos, but I'll do the absolute best that I can for you guys to get as much video content for you guys on this test server, so you know what to expect. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and hope it was somewhat helpful and enlightening to you guys. Remember, don't react too angrily. You know, hopefully Wargaming will know about this. I'm sure they already must know about this. So yeah, fingers crossed about that. If you enjoyed the video, guys, give it a like, leave me a comment, and let me know what you're most interested in the 9.17 test server, whether it's overmatching, whether it's the Swedish tier 10, whether it's a lower tier than 10. I will try and get that to you guys. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.